The Super Bowl just ended and the 2025 NFL season is officially over. Let's be honest, you don't want football to stop. Well, can I interest you in a fun, competitive football league, professional football league with names like AJ McCarron, Matt Corral, and Ted Ginn Jr.? Welcome to the UFL 2026. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of the D-Gen Talks here on DFSG Plus. It is a special edition. Look, football is over, but it doesn't have to be. We came off a great Super Bowl. We crowned a champion in the NFL 2025 season in the books. But I know if you're a football fan just like me, you don't want football to stop. And that is where spring football, the UFL, the United Football League, comes into play here, folks. This is the time. Hey, what this episode is, a little bit of show structure. First off, I am the DJ Doc. I am your host here. I've been covering UFL ever since it existed. And I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the UFL this season to get you interested. I know for a lot of people, I don't really know a lot about it. Well, let's just see, because I think it's something you're going to like. It is fun, high energy football. You're going to recognize names like AJ McCarron. If you watched college football, essentially, some of those guys that maybe people didn't think were good enough, they are playing in the UFL. And if you want to talk about some guys that have went from the UFL and then gone to the NFL, Cavante Turpin on the Dallas Cowboys. He was a USFL star. Jake Bates, Brandon Aubrey, some of the better kickers have come out of the UFL. Jalen Redmond, a guy who started for the Minnesota Vikings. So there's guys, Sal Cannella, who got a little bit of burn for the Cleveland Browns there. There are guys who played in the UFL and really used it to kind of jumpstart their NFL career. So it is a great, fun way to do that. And so we're going to break down, we're going to talk history. We're going to talk new ownership. We're going to talk when the schedule is, the new rules, and the new teams, because this UFL offseason has been busier than ever. And let's give it a little bit of background here. The UFL, the United Football League, spring football is not something that is a new concept, but it is something that has struggled to really take a foothold. By the UFL being a league in 2026, they are just one of two leagues that made it for a third consecutive season. The last one was the USFL back in the 80s, 83 to 85, and they disbanded not too long after. So hopefully UFL will be the one that can stick its foothold in. And really where the UFL came from is it was a merger between the XFL, the Extreme Football League, and the USFL, the United States Football League there. So back in 2024, they decided that they were going to merge because they were two separate leagues back then for a couple of years. XFL, the new brand XFL, the new brand USFL. There was the AAF. AAF didn't quite make it. COVID kind of got that one out of there, unfortunately. But they realized, hey, look, we know the success rate is not super high here in spring football, professional football there. Why don't we go ahead and merge and try to put all our eggs in this basket? And that's what they've done. The past 2 years, they merged and, things were going pretty good. But now this really is a league why I enjoy it. Not only is it football and it's awesome to watch, but it is really kind of an innovative league that is both used to test out new rules and then to showcase some of these players that were maybe an afterthought, or someone that maybe, hey, I don't know if that's going to translate to the professional level, coming from the college ranks or maybe, CFL or something like that, to then trying to be a jump start for the NFL. The NFL does not have a farm system, a minor league system like baseball, like the G League in basketball, hockey, things like that. This UFL kind of is serving as a farm system, as a kind of semi-pro, but professional football league, right? Almost like a D2 in college. So really like the league. I think it's a lot of fun. And we've seen rules kind of get over from the UFL into the NFL, right? The kickoff is the big one that we'll talk about. And I know it's got mixed reviews and can be a little controversial, but that came originally from the XFL, and then the UFL used it last year, and then now the NFL. Now, what you can say is that there has been more returns in the NFL because of it. It does still bring the kickoff. Now, I personally think they should go back to the regular kickoff and just move it back a little bit more to encourage kick returns, but hey, at least we're getting some special teams there. But yeah, the UFL been going for 2 years. Dwayne the Rock Johnson and Mrs. Garcia there, they were the two owners. And it was going okay. They did some partnerships. It was kind of flustering a little bit. Attendance had been a big issue at the actual games. The kind of home environment. St. Louis had a good one. DC has a good one. But other than that, pretty hit or miss. So they brought in a heavy hitter this year, and that is part owner here, co-owner, entrepreneur, multimillionaire Mike Rapoli there. Who is Mike Rapoli? Well, he is someone who he's kind of I'm not going to say a venture capitalist, but he's a big time entrepreneur, right? So he started Vitamin Water, Smart Water, Body Armor, sold them to Coca-Cola. He's worked in several different areas there. And they brought him in this offseason to partner with Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Danny Garcia, Fox, ESPN. But he's really the one that's going to be leading the business operations. Like vision, 5-year, 10-year plan. He's the one coming in like, I think I can really make this work. And he wants to expand to 16 teams, and he shook up the league a little bit. And I think this is actually a really nice, fresh breath of energy that the UFL really needed. The biggest thing that he's coming in here trying to do in Rapoli is he's trying to change the fan atmosphere. People love college football because of the obscure environments, because of the weird traditions, right? Like the pageantry, the traditions, the small towns, the town rallies around it. That's why we love college football. And the NFL, you get some of that, but the UFL really needs to understand that they're not the NFL, right? And they need to take advantage of these smaller markets and find something creative to make this appealing and make the crowd atmosphere and the home atmosphere appealing. The Dome in St. Louis has done a great job of that. The beer snake or lemonade snake, as ESPN tries to call it, for the DC Defenders has been something super cool and neat that the UFL needs to highlight and needs to continue to make these. So one of the big things he want to do is get them in smaller stadiums, because it's unrealistic to pack these 40 to 60,000 big stadiums, Ford Field, NFL stadiums, things like that. So they're going to more of the soccer stadiums, smaller venue vibe to really improve the fan atmosphere, get more people in the seats and give them a reason, make that feel like you're really kind of have some type of home field environment. So that is kind of what we're looking at here. Now the schedule has been released. Kickoff is March 27th, so just under 2 months away here, about 6, 7, 8 weeks there. And it is going to be pretty much similar as before, 10-week schedule there, regular season, 2-week postseason. Again, kicks off March 27th. There will be games on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and there's at least one Thursday, and there's a Tuesday night game as they plan around Easter, I believe, is when that comes. And then the UFL Championship is scheduled on June 13th, 2 p.m. Central Time, so 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. So 10-week regular season, 2 weeks postseason. You got your semifinal matchups, and then you got the championship, right? Now, in the past, there had been divisions. There had been a USFL division, teams coming from the USFL, and the XFL division, teams coming from the XFL. Now, one of the big changes is that is no longer a case. There is no divisions. There's only 8 teams in the league, so there is no divisions. So what they're doing is the top 4 teams. Top 4 teams will advance to the playoffs, and then they'll go from there. I'm imagining it would be, I haven't officially put this out, but I'm imagining it's going to be the 1 seed plays the 4 seed, and the 2 seed plays the 3 seed, with the higher seeds hosting, hopefully, home field advantage. That was also another thing with some of these other stadiums where, due to these stadiums being rented out, particularly Ford Field, they couldn't host the semifinal, and that's always just poor. So you always want to reward the team that earned it through the regular season with home field advantage. So hopefully they rectify that as well. Now, as we get into a little bit of the rules for 2026, we know some things, but we don't know all the things, right? So right now, if you look on the UFL's website, it says still the 2025 rules. Now, we have heard through some rumblings from coaches being interviewed and things like that, that there are some rule changes in this 2026 season. I would expect once training camp starts in about a week and a half, we'll get probably more. As closer to the season, we'll definitely get the full rules. So maybe I'll make another video about a rules update, because the rules are kind of the funky, fun part where you got to pay attention, right? So I'll go over two rumored changes that, I believe it was the Renegades coach, the Dallas Renegades coach, Nusselheisel. That is not how you pronounce his name. Rick Neuheisel. He was doing an interview with one of these content people, and he was talking about some of the potential new rules and how it's going to be a fun, innovative league. And one of them was a 4-point field goal for field goals over 60 yards. Now, college kickers, I mean, not college, but UFL kickers, it's almost like college kickers, right? You get more variety. Now, there's going to be names like Rodrigo Blankenship, like Hot Rod from a former Georgia player. There are going to be names but there's a little bit of variety, right? There are some players, Jake Bates, Brandon Aubrey, some of the better kickers in the NFL right now did come from the UFL. So this will be a weapon for some teams to be able to use. But we'll see how frequent that is. And then the other one is no punting in the opponent's territory. Once you cross the 50-yard line, apparently you are not allowed to punt. So you're going to have to go for it on fourth down or figure it out there. So those are the two rumored rule changes. Again, I'll probably do an update video when we get official rules. But as of right now, it's still 2025. So if you're coming first time trying to get into the league, hey, what's this UFL about? I love football, and let's be honest, I don't want to go 7-8 months without football. Then here's what you should know about some of the rules from last year, right? So the kickoff rule that we've all become very familiar for, the XFL actually brought it over. The USFL had a more normal kickoff rule, but they just kind of moved it back and kicked it off from the 20. But we are all kind of familiar with this landing zone and this almost kind of like rugby style of a setup here, where you got to kick it from the into the landing zone, from the 20 and on, and the players will, then they go from there, right? They do their thing. So there's penalized if you kick it in the end zone, it goes out to the 40. If you kick it in the landing zone and it goes into the end zone, and it comes out to the 20. So it's kind of, we've seen the NFL kickers actually throughout the year, they got a lot more savvy with this. So hopefully second year in the UFL, you'll see teams kind of understanding, hey, it doesn't make sense. They're not going to kick it out of bounds, not going to kick through the end zone. So we're either going to get some returns, or we're going to try to, do some different kicks that are going to make it harder to field the ball. No other rules. Head coaches challenge. So in last year, there's always a head coaches challenge. That's not a new thing, but you can challenge on a play anything. Like the cool part is, like, okay, let's say somebody scores a touchdown. One team scores a touchdown, no penalties called, but there was a false start, or there was a hold, an obvious hold that was just not called. If someone in the booth and the coaching staff sees that, the head coach can throw the challenge flag, and they can challenge any play. They can challenge a scoring play, like any major play that they see. And if they get it correct, they earn another challenge. They earn a second challenge. So, this can have a big impact, right? So you talk about, oh man, the refs really missed one, right? So you go back to that Rams Saints playoff game, right? The NFC playoff game where the guy got absolutely drilled. I believe it was the Saints player that got drilled. Now I'm trying to misremember, but it was a clear defensive pass interference that was not called. Head coach can throw a challenge on that play, say, hey, look, you guys missed this. This should be a defense pass interference. And that would allow the refs to overturn that call. So that is one that is a nuance that we'll see if it makes its way to the NFL. But yeah, you can challenge on anything, any aspect of the play, and you will get a second if you get it right. Onside kicks do not exist in the UFL. Instead, if you want to try to retain the ball, if you are down going in the fourth quarter, if you are down in the game, if you are trailing in the game, you can go for a 4th and 12 on your own 28 in lieu of an onside kick. So actually, with the way they were changing this, and obviously with the kickoff, how are you going to do an onside kick, right? But the way that onside kicks have been so low, since they've not allowed people to get a running head start and change the rules there, you actually have a much better chance of getting a 4th and 12. Still not a great opportunity, but we've seen a decent amount of these converted, whether it's, pass interference or just kind of working your way 13 plus yards down the field. So no onside kicks, but if you want to go for an onside kick, you have to be trailing. So you can't do it whenever you want, but you have to be trailing in the fourth quarter. And you can do a 4th and 12 from your own 28-yard line. Also, no extra points in the UFL. Instead of lining up for a kick after, it's almost like a flag football type deal where you can go for 1, 2, or 3. From you go for 1 point from the 2 yard line, 2 points from the 5 yard line, and 3 points from the 10 yard line. There, overtime. Overtime is a bit interesting. It's almost like a soccer shootout type vibe. It's basically 3 plays from the opponent's 5 yard line, no kicks allowed, and it's basically a best of 3, right? So, if one team converts one and in 3 tries and the other team converts 0, then that team wins. If you get, obviously, if they both convert 3, like back, and it's a sudden death, it just keeps going until one misses, right? So it's basically similar to what happens in college football after the second overtime now, where it's just alternating 2 point conversion, except it is from the 5 yard line in the UFL, and it's kind of that best of 3 format, which we've seen a couple times. It's definitely exciting, gets a little bit interesting. And then last rule here I want to talk about: double forward pass on one play behind the line of scrimmage is legal. So essentially, okay, double passes, not something brand new, but you have to ensure that you are behind, my quarterback is throwing the ball behind him to allow you to throw the ball. UFL, as long as it's behind the line of scrimmage, my quarterback can throw the ball to a guy who steps 1 yard back, even if he's in front of him, and that wide receiver or that running back can throw the ball again for a second time. So again, it has to stay behind the line of scrimmage, but as long as nobody crosses the line of scrimmage and the ball hasn't crossed the line of scrimmage, you can throw a second forward pass there. So we've seen it. That one's a little more rare and a little bit trickier because, typically if you want to get space for the wide receiver from the cornerback, you got to step back a decent amount. So it kind of winds up looking like a normal double pass or like a reverse jet option. But what we can see is, like, if the quarterback were to hike the ball, hands it off to the running back in front of him, even if it's in front of him, if running back's behind the line of scrimmage, if they're in shotgun, that running back could throw the ball. So that's one rule that I like to see some coaches get a little creative and kind of, see how flush that out a little bit. But those are the rules there. All right, moving to roster creation. How are these teams made, right? So there's kind of 3 elements. Training camp roster is going to be anywhere from 60 to 64 players. The max is 64. But there's been 3 kind of ways that the UFL has kind of created their teams. So there's a quarterback draft. Now, typically, it seems like if the guy wants to stay part of the team, then you'll allow. And I'll kind of get to that. Let's do that first. There's something called a reserve list where a team gets up to 12 players they put on the reserve list, which is essentially like they're mine. You cannot take them, right? So they don't go into this pool of players where it's the quarterback draft, you have a regional college allocation, and a UFL draft. So they're basically, you franchise tag them essentially. So there's 12 players you put on the reserve list. Typically, most of your starting quarterbacks will go in there because teams want to keep that continuity. But there was a quarterback draft on January the 9th. Then there was a regional college allocation. Essentially, head coaches can choose up to 3 players from their allocated colleges, and that was defined by the UFL player personnel department to try to make it equitable. That one's a little bit like not exactly, kind of need more information on what exactly that means. Basically, they can sign 3 players through that way. And then there's a draft. January 13th to the 14th, there was a UFL draft. The first one was former UFL players who were not on the reserve list, so the team basically didn't franchise. They could get drafted there. And then there's a free agency draft on the 14th that players could, any player basically who wasn't under contract for another league. So we've seen players get removed from rosters because they get an NFL contract, which obviously that's the goal. So they're not going to play in the UFL. So that's kind of how they do their roster creation. So you should see some continuity. Again, you essentially pick the 12 players you want on your team from last year. And then everything else kind of gets into a pool where there's a draft and a situation like that has already happened, right? All right, last thing, let's talk about these teams because this is the most exciting part. Look, 8 teams, 1 league. So the number of teams did not change. However, there were teams that got removed, teams that got added, teams that got rebranded. So we're going to finish up the video talking about these teams and what they've done there. So 8 teams, right? And here, I'll put this back up as I go over them. So let's start with the teams that did not change, right? Because that's a little bit easier. So teams that did not change: Birmingham Stallions, who were back, and where they go 3-peat, I believe. Yeah, back to back. Not all in the UFL. They were 2-time UFL or 1-time UFL champion, but They did win the USFL 2 years in a row. So they were Skip Holtz and the Birmingham Stallions were like the dynasty of spring football that was finally dethroned last year. Then you have the DC Defenders, your reigning UFL champions from last year, and your St. Louis Battlehawks. Those are the three teams that were not moved. DC, St. Louis clearly have the best fan engagement, home environment. So Mike Rapoli rewarded them and kept them exactly the same. Birmingham does a decent job and they've had the success. So that allowed them to stay in Birmingham. But what happened was he removed three teams based on low attendance, poor market, and just, one of them, I'll get to in Michigan, was more the Ford Field situation just was not working out, was too expensive, and, they were booked for high school graduations, and it was just kind of a mess. So, the Memphis Showboats, no longer in the UFL, Michigan Panthers, no longer in the UFL, San Antonio Brahmas, unfortunately, no longer in the UFL, replaced by the Columbus Aviators over there in Columbus, great football town. Louisville Kings, great sports town, sports city, and the Orlando Storm are the new teams added. The rebranded teams, Houston Gamblers, formerly they were the Gamblers, then they were the Roughnecks, and then they were Gamblers back again. So going back to their OG roots, the Houston Gamblers, and then the Dallas Renegades changing from the Arlington Renegades. So that just kind of, they moved to Dallas, right? Because Arlington, not a very good market, very, very poor attendance for the team, even when the team was good. So new teams are the teams, 8 teams that we're going to talk about here. You've got Birmingham Stallions. They play at Protective Stadium there in Birmingham, Alabama. They had one of the best, probably the best coach in spring football, in Skip Holtz. He stepped away. He did not retire, but he stepped away. I know his pops, Lou Holtz, is not doing too well, so maybe it's that reason. Maybe it's a different coaching situation that he's trying to get into. But AJ McCarron, the former Alabama quarterback, he is now the head coach. No previous coaching experience, so this is going to be interesting, but someone hopefully that can get some of those Alabama fans into the door. Then you've got the Columbus Aviators. They're playing at the historic Crew Stadium, a soccer stadium, smaller venue, pack it, let's get it crazy. Their head coach, Ted Ginn Jr. Yes, the Ted Ginn Jr. you're thinking about in the former Ohio State Buckeye, the guy who, took a kickback in the Super Bowl, was that the national championship game that he did that? But electric returner, electric receiver, former Buckeye there, back in the Columbus area. So hopefully he brings some fans in there. The Dallas Renegades, again, coming from Arlington, moving to Toyota Stadium in Frisco, Texas, another soccer venue that, again, smaller venues. Let's pack these things and get crazy energy. Bob Stoops, former Oklahoma legendary coach. He won the 2023 XFL championship with the Renegades. He is retired. And Rick Neuheisel, whose name I butchered earlier, I apologize for that. But former coach, coached at UCLA and a couple other different spots. He is now the new coach for the Dallas Renegades. Your defending champion DC Defenders play at Audi Field, another soccer stadium with the famous beer snake, man. That is one of the cooler home environments in the UFL. Hopefully we see a lot more of that energy and, fans getting into it. They're the only one whose coach is staying the same. So you talk about continuity. This is the ideal continuity right now. Shannon Harris, who was the interim coach, because the coach had I believe went on to Tennessee State or one of those. He took a college job, so Shannon Harris filled in, and he's coming back, and he's the defending champ. And man, that team was rolling last year, especially if they got hot at the right time late in the year. Houston Gamblers, formerly the Houston Roughnecks, they are playing at the Shell Energy Stadium. CJ Johnson, Curtis Johnson was the former coach. He just wasn't very good. He had the worst win percentage in the UFL for over the past couple of years, so they let him go. Kevin Sumlin, former Texas A&M Aggie coach, he is coming back. He did a little bit of coaching in spring football, I believe, in the XFL. I think it was with Houston before, so he's coming back to be the coach of the Houston Gamblers. Then you got the Louisville Kings, which is forgot to mention, but Mike Rapoli, he's a big horse racing guy. He's got his own stables there. He's got some horses. So Louisville, with Churchill Downs and stuff, you can imagine the connections there. But their coach is Chris Redman. He is the former Louisville Cardinal quarterback. So if you're a Louisville fan, again, local guys with local ties to get the fan base excited, invigorated. They've had some of these fan meetups already that have been really, exciting for the league as far as numbers and things like that. So they're playing at Lynn Family Stadium, another soccer venue there. The Orlando Storm playing at Inter and Co Stadium. They're a new franchise. Anthony Beck, he was the coach of the St. Louis Battlehawks for a couple years, the father of Rocco Beck. If you watch Iowa State football, he's moving down to Florida. So I don't know how they worked that out, but he's going from St. Louis, going to coach this new team out there in Orlando. So he's coached in the UFL the past 2 years, just different team. And then finally, the team with the best fan base in the UFL by far, the St. Louis Battlehawks. They're still playing at the Dome at America's Center. They have had 35, 40,000 folks packed in there going crazy for the Battlehawks. By far the best environment. Hopefully they can get a championship for that city. But yeah, former coach Anthony Beck, now Ricky Pearl, a guy who was on the coaching staff for the past couple of years for the Battlehawks. So some continuity there, but Pearl taking over for Beck. So those are your 8 teams, folk. Again, 8 teams in this league, 3 new teams, 2 removed, rebranded teams, and then your 3 teams that were able to stay put and stay right there. Very, very exciting things to come here. Again, season kicks off March 27th. Now, what I am going to be doing is I'm going to be coming out with a team previews for each team. So, what do they look like last year? What do they look like this year? What's the roster looking like? What's the quarterback room? What can we expect from this team? Who are the coaches? So I'm going to do team previews for all 8 of the teams. I'll probably do a season preview episode talking about futures and things like that. Typically, this is a sports betting channel, so a lot of what I'm going to focus on in the season preview is talking about, hey, where can we find an edge here and maybe in the futures market? And then finally, I've been doing this for the past couple of years, I believe 2 years at least, if not 3. I do a weekly show where I break down all 4 of the games and I give out my best bets, player props, and basically win you some money. Because the fun part about this is, the sports books have offered more and more. So we got to bet on props last season. It's been first touchdowns. Like they've been getting really kind of, as this league kind of shows that it's actually going to be a thing, sports books are following along and we're getting the opportunity to bet on more things and win on more fun bets that you can do in the NFL and college and some of these other leagues. So, UFL United Football League 2026 kicks off here in just under 2 months. Just a quick video talking about 30-minute video talking about what you need to know about the UFL. Hey, in the comments, let me know. Is there anything else you want to do? I said when the rules come out, I'll probably do like a short, hey, this is the updated rules, because you really got to pay attention to the rules. That's where, especially if you're going to be betting on this stuff or just enjoying it, watching it, you want to make sure you understand all the little nuances, because it is not just the same rules as college or the same rules as NFL. It is its own beast, its own entity there. But anything else you want to know about the league, if you're just excited about the league, who your favorite team is going to be, you got to pick a team, man. Even if you're not one of these cities, you got to pick a team and become a fan, because that's the best way to get into it. But there is high quality football in this league. There's guys, Cavante Turpin, who make an impact on the league, a starter for the Dallas Cowboys. There are guys that make impacts in the NFL. So this is a very fun league to be able to see, like, oh wow, I saw Brandon Aubrey when he was with the USFL with the Stallions. I saw, Jake Bates when he was Michigan Panther, right? Some of these other guys, Sal Cannella, these guys that are Javante Kirk, guys that you should be getting opportunities that, like, wow, like, yeah, he's good, So it's a very, very fun league. And nobody is happy about the NFL being over. We all love football. If you're on this channel, if you're found upon this, you probably love football. I'm telling you right now, you need to get invested in the UFL for the 2026 season. All right, folks, that is it. Again, probably weekly or so up until the season, I'll be putting out team preview, season preview, a video here and there, rules update. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to us here, because I got you covered all off season. Typically, and we do NFL, we do college football, and we do the UFL. So if you love sports and love making money off of football, this is the channel for you. All right, folks, you know what they say. A lock a day keeps the bookie away. And here at the GDN Docs, we've got your prescription. From Doc here on DFSG Plus, I am out of here.